The blind blacksmith paid $4 for pregnant woman sold by father. He was her guardian angel from the past. The sun had just begun to rise over the small, dusty village, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Birds chirped softly, and the air carried the faint smell of baked bread and fresh earth. Life here was simple, and the villagers lived quietly, doing what they could to survive. But for some families, survival meant making choices no one would ever imagine. Among them was a poor man who lived with his young daughter. He was a farmer who barely earned enough to feed himself, let alone a growing child. The girl, just 17, had grown up knowing hardship. Her clothes were often worn, her shoes patched more than once, and her hair tied in a simple braid that never stayed neat. Despite this, she had a gentle heart and a quiet strength. She helped her father in the fields, carried water from the well, and took care of their small home. But the innocence of her life was about to be shattered in a way she could never have expected. Her father, once a kind man, had grown desperate. The crops had failed for the third year in a row, and he owed money to the village trader. The trader was a stern man with little patience and even less sympathy. Every day, he came to collect what was owed, and every day the father tried to figure out a way to pay him. But money was scarce, and the father's mind became clouded with worry and fear. He began to see his daughter not as the child he loved, but as a solution to his problems. It was early morning when the trader arrived, his horse clopping along the dirt path. The father stood outside, wringing his hands while his daughter watched, a cold fear creeping into her chest. She sensed that something was wrong, that today would be different from any other day she had ever known. Her father spoke in a low, hurried voice, negotiating with the trader. She couldn't hear every word, but she caught the tone, the desperation, the pleading, the fear. And then the unthinkable happened. Her father offered her to the trader. Not as a servant, not as a worker, but as a person, traded for a few coins. The young girl's heart froze. She could not believe what she was hearing. "Father, please," she whispered, her voice trembling, but the father, his eyes full of worry and shame, only nodded. He could not see any other way. He thought he was saving the rest of the family, but in doing so, he was breaking his daughter's world. The villagers gathered nearby, murmuring among themselves. Some shook their heads in disapproval, while others averted their eyes. No one spoke, but everyone understood the gravity of the moment. This was not just a transaction, it was a betrayal of the deepest kind. The girl's stomach turned, and tears welled up in her eyes. She was pregnant, a fact that made her even more vulnerable, though the villagers noticed it quietly. She clutched her hands to her stomach, feeling a mix of fear and confusion. She did not know what the future held, and the uncertainty was terrifying. The trader stepped forward, a rough man with a sharp gaze. He counted the coins with careless precision, then handed them to the father. 4 coins, that was all it took. 4 coins for a human life, for a girl carrying her child, for a daughter who had once laughed and played in the fields with her father. The father took the coins silently, his face pale and his hands shaking. He could not look at his daughter, and she could not look at him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft clinking of metal and the distant crow of a rooster. The young girl felt her world collapse around her. She wanted to run, to scream, to disappear, but she was trapped. The trader gestured for her to follow, and she hesitated. Her father's eyes met hers for a brief moment, filled with something that was almost human, almost like regret. But it was too late. She was being led away, and there was nothing she could do. Each step felt heavier than the last, and the dust from the path seemed to cling to her like the weight of the situation. As she walked, she tried to understand why her father had done this. Was it truly for survival, or was it something else, something darker? She remembered the days when her father would tell her stories at night, about heroes and brave women, about courage and kindness. How could the man who once seemed so strong and protective now sell her to a stranger? The thoughts swirled in her mind, and she felt a strange emptiness, a void where love and safety used to be. The villagers watched her go, some with sympathy, some with silent judgment. No one stepped forward to help. Life in the village was harsh, and people had learned to turn away from others' misfortunes, fearing that getting involved would bring trouble upon themselves. But even among the silence, the girl's spirit refused to completely break. There was a small flame inside her, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would come to her aid. The trader led her to his cart, a rough wooden structure with little comfort. She climbed in, careful not to disturb the few belongings she had managed to bring. As the cart moved, the landscape changed from familiar fields to open, uncertain roads. She could see the village shrinking in the distance, the life she had known slipping away. The wind blew her hair across her face, and she felt the tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She whispered a prayer, not knowing if anyone would hear it, hoping for protection, for guidance, for a miracle. Hours passed, and the cart finally stopped near a blacksmith's workshop at the edge of another village. The young girl's heart raced. She had no idea why the cart had stopped here or who awaited her. The trader spoke briefly with the man at the workshop and handed over the responsibility. The girl's eyes widened as she realized that the man was blind. His face was kind but worn, and he moved with careful precision, guided by senses she could not imagine. The blacksmith took her hand gently and helped her down from the cart. "Don't be afraid," he said softly, his voice calm and steady. She looked into his eyes, and despite his blindness, she felt a sense of safety she hadn't felt in hours. Something about him was different. He did not see her as a commodity, as a burden, or as a problem. He saw her as a person, as someone worthy of care and protection. As she followed him into the workshop, she felt the first spark of hope ignite within her. She did not know this man, and she did not know what the future held, but she knew that in that moment she was not alone. The blind blacksmith had stepped into her life at the exact moment she needed him most, and though she could not yet understand why, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the first time since the morning, she allowed herself to breathe, to imagine that perhaps, just perhaps, she might survive this ordeal with her dignity and her life intact. The blacksmith led her to a small, clean room at the back of the workshop. He offered her water and bread, simple but nourishing. She ate slowly, her hands trembling, her mind racing with questions. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am someone who believes that no one should be treated as less than human," he replied. "Rest now, you are safe here." And in that moment, the young girl understood that her journey, though filled with hardship, had taken an unexpected turn. The blind blacksmith was not just a man. He was a guardian, a protector, a light in the darkness that had threatened to consume her. She did not yet know the full story of why he had come into her life, but she knew one thing with certainty: she was no longer alone. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change, of hope, and of the possibility that even in the darkest moments, kindness could appear when it was needed most. The morning sun streamed through the small window of the blacksmith's workshop, casting warm golden light on the wooden floor. The young woman sat quietly on a worn stool, her hands folded in her lap. She had slept fitfully during the night, plagued by dreams of her father, the trader, and the journey that had brought her here. Though the room was humble, it was clean, and the air smelled faintly of iron and coal. She realized that, for the first time in many days, she felt safe, but there was also an unease she could not shake. She didn't know this man, the blind blacksmith, yet she had been placed in his care. The blacksmith moved about the workshop with quiet efficiency, tending to a small fire and organizing his tools. The rhythmic clang of his hammer against metal filled the room at intervals, a steady, soothing sound. He worked without hurry, carefully shaping a piece of iron into a simple horseshoe. Though he could not see the metal before him, his hands were precise, and his movements reflected years of experience. The young woman watched him, fascinated by his skill and patience. "Do you have a name?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. The blacksmith paused, then smiled gently. "I am called Thomas," he said. "And you?" I am Leela," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Even speaking her name aloud felt strange, as if saying it made her reality more real. Thomas nodded. "Leela, it is good to meet you. You are safe here. Nothing will happen to you under my roof." Leela's eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. She wanted to believe him, but the betrayal she had experienced the day before weighed heavily on her heart. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice trembling. I am just a girl. I have nothing to offer." Thomas set the iron aside and turned to face her, his expression kind. "No one is ever just a girl, Leela. Everyone has value. Everyone deserves care. You may not see it now, but you are worth far more than those few coins your father received for you. And sometimes it is not about what someone can give in return. It is about doing what is right." Leela looked at him, confused and amazed. His words were so simple, yet they carried a weight she could feel in her chest. For so long, she had believed that her life was defined by her father's choices, by the poverty that surrounded her, by the fear that had followed her every step. But Thomas's words offered a small spark of hope, a glimpse of a different way of seeing herself. Over the next few days, Leela began to settle into the workshop. Thomas gave her simple tasks, carrying water, cleaning the floor, helping him organize tools. The work was not difficult, but it was new to her. She had never done anything like it before, and she was clumsy at first. Tools slipped from her hands, buckets spilled, and her movements were awkward, but Thomas never scolded her. Instead, he guided her patiently, showing her how to hold a hammer properly, how to pour water without spilling, how to keep the fire steady. "Your hands are capable," he said one day as she struggled to lift a heavy iron rod. "You just need to trust them." Leela listened carefully and tried again. Slowly, with his guidance, she learned. The work gave her a sense of purpose she had not felt in a long time. Each small success, each task completed correctly, made her chest swell with pride. She began to understand that Thomas did not see her as weak or helpless. He saw potential even in the small, everyday acts. But it was not just the work that drew her attention. It was Thomas himself. He was a quiet man who spoke little but observed much. Sometimes he would ask questions about her life, her dreams, her fears. Sometimes he would tell stories, stories of people he had known, of kindnesses he had witnessed, of lessons he had learned. Leela found herself hanging on his every word, fascinated by the way he could make ordinary things feel meaningful. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Thomas sat across from Leela by the small hearth. The fire crackled softly, filling the room with warmth. "Leela," he began, "do you ever wonder why some people appear in our lives at the right time, almost as if by chance?" She nodded slowly. I think about it a lot. I keep wondering why I am here, why you are helping me, why all of this is happening." Thomas smiled gently. "Sometimes the answers are not simple. Sometimes it is not about chance, but about the choices we make and the people we are meant to meet. You are here now, and that is what matters. What happens next is up to us." Leela felt a warmth in her chest at his words, a feeling she had not known in many months. She realized that for the first time since her father sold her, she felt in control of something, even a little. She could make small choices, like helping Thomas with his work, learning new skills, and caring for herself and her child. The sense of hope grew steadily, like a seed taking root in the soil. Days turned into weeks. Leela's confidence grew, and she began to see herself in a new light. She could cook simple meals, tend the fire, and even help with minor repairs in the workshop. Thomas praised her efforts, always encouraging, never harsh. His belief in her abilities became a mirror in which she could see herself differently. She was not just a girl sold for a few coins. She was capable, strong, and deserving of kindness. One afternoon, as Thomas hammered a piece of iron, Leela noticed the gentleness in his movements. Even though he could not see, he handled the metal with care, shaping it slowly and thoughtfully. "Why do you work so carefully?" she asked. Thomas looked at her, a smile in his voice. "Every piece of work deserves respect. Every life, every person, every moment deserves respect. If I treat what I do with care, I also learn to treat people with care." Leela reflected on this for a long time. She began to understand that Thomas's care for her was not just an act of kindness. It was a philosophy, a way of living. He treated the world and the people in it with thoughtfulness and patience, and in doing so, he taught her how to do the same. As her belly grew with the child she carried, Thomas helped her prepare. He made her a small, comfortable space in the workshop, providing blankets and a simple bed. He spoke gently about the baby, answering her questions with honesty and warmth. He never judged, never scolded, never pressured her. For the first time in her life, Leela felt truly cared for. One night, unable to sleep, she sat quietly by the window looking at the stars. She thought about her father, the trader, and the village she had left behind. A part of her still felt sadness, anger, and confusion, but another part of her felt gratitude, hope, and a sense of safety she had never known. She realized that life could change, that even in the darkest moments there could be light. Thomas approached quietly, sensing her restlessness. He sat beside her without a word, letting her feel his presence. The silence was comforting, not heavy. After a while, he spoke softly. "You are stronger than you think, Leela, stronger than you know, and you are not alone." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not just tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of understanding that someone truly cared for her. In that moment, she began to believe in the possibility of a better future. Days and nights passed, and the bond between Thomas and Leela grew. It was not a bond of romance or obligation, but a bond of trust, respect, and quiet protection. He was her guardian not by duty but by choice. He had appeared in her life at the exact moment she needed him most, and his presence was a shield against the fear and uncertainty that had defined her days. Through his patience, guidance, and gentle care, Leela began to heal. She laughed again, small but genuine, at Thomas's stories and jokes. She began to imagine a life beyond fear, beyond betrayal, beyond poverty. She could dream again, and that was a gift she had never expected to receive. In the quiet moments of the workshop, as the fire glowed and the iron cooled, Leela realized something extraordinary. Sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person who seems ordinary, the person who seems unremarkable, is the one who becomes your greatest protector. And sometimes, the world surprises you with kindness when you need it most. Though the past still haunted her and the future remained uncertain, Leela knew one thing with certainty. She was no longer alone. And in that knowledge, she found a strength she had never known before. Days turned into weeks, and Leela began to feel more at home in the blacksmith's workshop. The fire in the hearth was always warm. The smell of iron and coal became familiar, and Thomas's presence felt like a steady anchor in a world that had been chaotic and cruel. Yet, even with the safety and care he provided, she couldn't shake a strange feeling, a sense that Thomas knew more about her than he should. It was subtle at first, the way he seemed to anticipate her needs, the stories he told that reminded her of memories she barely remembered, and the gentle way he guided her through her days as though he had always known her. One afternoon, Leela was helping Thomas organize a shelf filled with iron tools. She picked up a small, rusty hammer and handed it to him. He took it carefully, and as his fingers brushed against hers, he paused for a moment. Leela noticed the hesitation and the strange look in his eyes, even though she knew he could not see. "You have a memory of this," Thomas said softly, more to himself than to her. "I can feel it." Leela frowned. "Memory of what?" she asked, unsure what he meant. Thomas did not answer immediately. He set the hammer down and placed his hands gently on hers. "Years ago, I knew someone like you, someone with your courage, your strength, your kindness. I promised to protect her. And now, I believe fate has brought me back to do it again." Leela's heart skipped a beat. Could it be possible? Was this blind blacksmith, the man who had saved her from despair, somehow connected to her past in a way she could not yet understand? She wanted to ask more, but the words stuck in her throat. Fear and curiosity battled inside her. Over the next few days, she began paying closer attention to Thomas. There were moments when he spoke of people she vaguely remembered from her childhood, neighbors, friends, and even a distant relative. He recalled small details, like the way her mother used to tie her hair or how she liked to pick flowers near the stream. Leela was astonished. How could a man she had only just met know so much about her life? One evening after finishing their work, Thomas sat across from her by the fire. His hands rested on his knees and his head was slightly bowed. "Leela," he began, "do you remember the story of the little girl who once got lost near the old well?" Leela's eyes widened. She did remember that day. She had wandered too far while collecting water and had gotten scared when the sun began to set. A kind stranger had found her and guided her home. "I remember," she whispered. "But I don't understand. Why are you asking me?" Thomas smiled faintly. "Because I was that stranger. I saved you then just as I am saving you now. It seems that life has given me a second chance to protect you when you needed it most." Tears filled Leela's eyes. She could not speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the revelation. This man, who had been so patient and caring, had been a guardian in her life long before she even realized it. The thought made her feel both amazed and comforted. She had never imagined that someone would come back into her life in such a way, someone who truly cared and had been watching over her from the shadows. The realization changed the way she looked at Thomas. She noticed the little things, the soft way he spoke, the careful way he guided her hands when she worked with tools, the patience he showed when she made mistakes. Everything suddenly made sense. He was not just helping her because he was kind, he had a deep personal reason. He had been part of her life all along. One morning, Leela woke up early and watched Thomas as he prepared the forge for the day. The fire glowed softly, and the rhythmic tapping of his hammer filled the room. She felt a mix of awe and gratitude. Thomas, she said quietly, I think I understand now. You have always been my protector. Even before today, even before the workshop, you were there for me. Thomas stopped his work and smiled, though his eyes could not see her expression. Yes, Leela. Life is full of strange ways of guiding us. Sometimes the people who protect us are not obvious. Sometimes they appear when we need them the most, even if we do not realize it. The bond between them deepened with this understanding. Leela felt a sense of trust she had never known. She began to share her thoughts and fears with him openly, without holding back. She told him about her father, the trader, and the fear she had felt when she was sold. She spoke about her dreams for the child she carried, and about her hopes for a future where she could be independent and strong. Thomas listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished, he would offer gentle guidance and encouragement. "You are stronger than you believe, Leela," he said one evening as they sat by the fire. "The child you carry is part of that strength. You will protect each other, and together you will find a way forward." Leela began to understand that strength did not always come from physical power or money. It came from courage, from resilience, from the ability to trust someone when life had been unkind. She felt her confidence grow, and with it, a sense of hope she had never experienced before. One day, while helping Thomas repair a broken door hinge, Leela noticed something unusual. He hummed a tune that sounded familiar, one she had heard in her childhood home. "That song," she began, her voice trembling, "I remember it. My mother used to sing it." Thomas paused, then nodded. "I remember it too. I have always remembered. It is strange how certain memories can linger even when everything else is forgotten. And now they have brought us together again." Leela felt a shiver of recognition. This was more than coincidence. There was a connection between them that went beyond time and distance. She began to believe that their meeting was destined, that somehow fate had guided Thomas back into her life at the precise moment she needed him. As the days passed, Leela also noticed how attentive Thomas was to her health and the baby growing inside her. He made sure she rested, ate properly, and avoided overexertion. He would speak softly to her, telling stories to distract her from fear and worry. Sometimes he would take her to the nearby stream to collect fresh water or to watch the birds in the trees. These small acts of care made her feel cherished, not just for herself, but for the life she carried. One evening, as they sat by the hearth, Leela turned to Thomas with a serious expression. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Why did you choose to pay for me? Why did you intervene when no one else did?" Thomas looked at her, his face thoughtful. "Because it was the right thing to do, and because you were never truly alone, even when it seemed that way. I promised long ago that I would protect you if fate ever allowed me the chance again, and now I can fulfill that promise." Leela's heart swelled with gratitude. She realized that her life had been touched by someone extraordinary, someone who had stepped forward when others had turned away. She understood that strength, kindness, and courage could take many forms, and sometimes the greatest heroes were not those with fame or wealth, but those with hearts willing to act when it mattered most. The days in the workshop passed peacefully, though the outside world remained uncertain. Leela began to feel a sense of normalcy she had never known. She laughed more freely, learned new skills, and even began to dream of a life beyond fear. Thomas's guidance and protection allowed her to reclaim parts of herself she had thought were lost forever. Yet, despite the calm, there were moments when the past would creep in, memories of her father, the traitor, and the pain of betrayal. In those moments, Thomas was always there, offering comfort, reminding her of her strength, and helping her focus on the future. Leela realized that life was not about forgetting the past, but about learning to move forward with courage and hope. One night, as the stars shone brightly above, Leela whispered a prayer of thanks. She was grateful for Thomas, for the child she carried, and for the chance to start anew. She understood that life could be unpredictable and sometimes cruel, but it could also be full of kindness, protection, and love from unexpected places. In the quiet of the workshop, as the fire burned low and the tools rested peacefully, Leela felt a deep sense of connection, to Thomas, to her child, and to the world around her. She understood that even in the darkest moments, light could appear, and that sometimes the people who seemed ordinary could become the greatest blessings in one's life. Weeks passed in the quiet village where Thomas's workshop stood. Leela had grown stronger, more confident, and even joyful at times, yet a part of her still carried the shadow of the past. She thought often about her father, the traitor, and the betrayal she had endured. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see the fear and confusion in her own face as she had been handed over for a few coins. But Thomas's presence was a constant comfort, and slowly, the weight of that fear began to lighten. One late afternoon, as the golden sun dipped low behind the distant hills, Thomas sat with Leela outside the workshop. The air was warm, filled with the scent of fresh grass and the faint smoke from the forge. Leela noticed the quiet expression on his face, and something in his tone suggested he wanted to share a story. "Leela," he said softly, "there is something about your past I think you should know, something that might help you understand why we have met again." Leela's heart beat quickly. She had felt for some time that Thomas knew more than he had revealed, but hearing him say it out loud made her nervous and curious. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Thomas paused, letting the sound of the wind rustle through the trees. "Years ago, when you were very young, your family faced a great danger. You were in trouble and someone had to protect you. I was there." Leela's eyes widened. "You were, but I don't remember." "You were too small to remember clearly," Thomas replied gently. "But I remember everything. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance again, I would watch over you and protect you from harm. And now, life has given me that chance once more." The words settled over Leela like a warm blanket, yet they also brought questions. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" she whispered. Why didn't anyone say anything about you?" Thomas shook his head slowly. "Life is full of hardships, Leela. Sometimes people do what they think is right, but they do not see the full picture. Your father, he loved you even if his choices were wrong. But he could not protect you from everything. I could not always be there. That is why now I stay close. That is why I intervene." Leela stared at him, feeling a mixture of awe and gratitude. The man who had guided her hands, cared for her needs, and listened to her fears was not just a kind stranger. He had been part of her life since childhood, quietly watching over her, waiting for the moment he could protect her again. In the days that followed, Leela noticed small reminders of the past hidden in Thomas's actions. He knew the way she liked her hair tied, remembered her favorite flowers, and even hummed the tunes her mother used to sing. Each little gesture felt like a thread connecting the present to memories she had long forgotten. Leela realized that Thomas's care was more than guidance. It was personal, rooted in a shared history she was only beginning to understand. One morning, as Leela was helping Thomas gather water from the stream, she asked, "Thomas, did you know my mother?" He nodded quietly. "Yes, I did. Your mother was a kind and brave woman. She worried about you constantly, as any parent would. I promised her years ago that I would do my best to protect you if she ever could not." Leela felt tears prick her eyes. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because," Thomas said softly, "you need to understand that you are not alone in this world. Even when it seems like no one cares, there are those who quietly watch, quietly protect, and quietly hope. I am one of those people. I have always been connected to you, and I always will be." The revelation filled Leela with a strange mixture of comfort and disbelief. She had lived for so long in fear, never trusting anyone fully. But now she understood that this man, with his quiet ways and careful hands, had been a guardian all along. He had stepped into her life at the exact moments she needed protection, from her early childhood to the present danger. As the days passed, Thomas began to share more about the events of the past. He told her about the time he had found her lost near the old well, about the storms he had braved to make sure she was safe, and about the promises he had made silently, hoping one day to fulfill them fully. Leela listened intently, her heart swelling with gratitude and awe. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked one evening as they sat by the hearth. "I wanted to wait until you were ready to understand," Thomas replied. "Some truths are heavy for a young heart. I needed to be sure that when you learned about my connection to you, you could see it as a gift, not a burden." Leela nodded slowly. She could feel the weight of his words, the careful thought behind every action he had taken to protect her. It made her see her own life differently, not just as a series of hardships, but as a journey guided by unseen hands, by kindness and protection in unexpected forms. One day, while Thomas was repairing a broken cartwheel outside, Leela noticed a scar on his hand. "What happened?" she asked, curious. Thomas smiled faintly. "A long time ago, I cut my hand while protecting someone from danger. I don't remember all the details, but it reminds me that protecting others is never easy. It can hurt, it can be exhausting, but it is always worth it." Leela's heart swelled with admiration. This man, blind yet wise, had endured so much and yet had never stopped caring for her. She realized that protection, true protection, was more than physical. It was patience, understanding, guidance, and unwavering presence. Thomas embodied all of that. As the weeks continued, Leela began to feel a sense of peace she had never known. She could laugh freely, enjoy the small moments, and dream about a future where she and her child could thrive. She also began to understand the depth of Thomas's care and the reasons behind his every action. He had not just saved her from immediate danger. He had been silently preparing her for a life of strength, courage, and hope. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Leela turned to Thomas. "I understand now. You've always been my guardian, even when I didn't know it. You've protected me more than anyone else ever could." Thomas reached out and gently took her hand. "Yes, Leela, and I always will. My connection to you is not just about past promises. It is about the present and the future. I will be here for you and your child to guide you, protect you, and help you grow into the life you deserve." Leela felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and hope. For the first time, she truly believed that the past did not define her. She had been protected, cherished, and guided, and now she could carry that strength forward into the future. The realization gave her a new sense of courage. She began to take on more responsibilities in the workshop, learning to craft simple tools, mend broken items, and even help Thomas teach others who came seeking his skill. Each task made her stronger and more confident. She began to see herself not as a victim of circumstance, but as a young woman capable of shaping her own life with guidance and wisdom. Through these experiences, Leela also noticed a change in Thomas. Though he remained quiet and humble, there was a warmth in his presence that seemed to grow each day. His care for her was not just protective. It was deeply personal, rooted in a history they shared and a promise he had kept for many years. One quiet night, as the stars sparkled above, Leela reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that life had a strange way of connecting people, of bringing the right person at the right time. Thomas had been her guardian in the past, and he had returned to protect her in the present. It was a reminder that even in a world that could be cruel and unforgiving, there was always hope, always guidance, and always someone willing to step forward when it mattered most. With this understanding, Leela felt a profound sense of peace. She was no longer defined by the mistakes of others or the hardships she had endured. She was guided, protected, and cherished, and she had the strength to face the future. The bond between her and Thomas was unbreakable, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and the unseen connections that guide our lives. The days in the village grew warmer as spring approached, and the small workshop at the edge of the woods became a haven not just for Leela and Thomas, but for the hope they shared. Leela could feel life in a new way. The rhythm of the days, the warmth of the sun, and the gentle care that Thomas offered were slowly healing the wounds she had carried for so long. She often thought about her child, feeling tiny kicks and movements, a living symbol of the new chapter beginning in her life. Thomas remained a constant presence, always calm, always attentive. Though he could not see, he seemed to notice everything. He sensed when Leela was anxious, when she was tired, and when she needed encouragement. Sometimes he would pause in his work, come over, and gently place his hand on her shoulder, grounding her in the moment. It was a comfort she could not put into words, yet it filled her heart with gratitude. One morning, Leela woke early and decided to go for a walk by the stream near the workshop. The air was fresh and filled with the smell of flowers beginning to bloom. Birds chirped happily, and the gentle rustling of leaves accompanied her steps. She walked slowly, savoring the peacefulness, and thought about everything that had happened over the past months. The fear, the pain, the betrayal, and finally, the protection and kindness that Thomas had shown her. As she reached a bend in the stream, Thomas appeared beside her. He moved carefully, guided by the familiar sounds of her steps. "Good morning, Leela," he said softly. "Good morning," she replied, smiling. She felt a surge of joy at seeing him, as if the sunlight had grown brighter simply because he was there. Thomas studied the water as it flowed over the smooth stones. "Do you see how the stream moves even when obstacles appear? Rocks, fallen branches, even small animals. Yet it continues forward, always finding a way." Leela nodded, understanding the meaning behind his words. "Yes," she said, "it doesn't stop because of the obstacles, it keeps going, finding its way." "Exactly," Thomas said, And life is much the same. There will always be challenges, but with care, patience, and strength, we can move forward. You have learned that, Leela. You have shown courage and resilience, and your child will grow up knowing those lessons as well. Leela felt a lump in her throat. His words touched something deep inside her. She had been afraid, lost, and unsure, but Thomas had guided her like the stream he described, steadily, patiently, and without judgment. She realized that she was no longer a victim of circumstance. She had become a survivor, a young woman who could face the world with courage. Over the following weeks, Leela's belly grew larger, and Thomas helped her prepare for the arrival of the baby. He built a small cradle, stitched blankets, and even crafted tiny utensils, each made with care and attention. Every action was deliberate, every movement filled with love. Leela watched him, amazed at his dedication and tenderness. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that this man, blind, humble, and gentle, was not just her protector but also her family in every meaningful way. One afternoon, as they rested after a long morning of work, Leela spoke softly. "Thomas, I've been thinking, I don't just feel safe because you protect me. I feel like you've always been with me, even when I didn't know it, even when I was afraid. You were my guardian all along." Thomas's face softened and he nodded. "Yes, Leela, that is true. I have been with you for a long time. Sometimes protection comes quietly, unseen, unnoticed, but it is there always. And now I am here fully because it is time to be present, to help you and your child face the world with confidence." Leela's eyes filled with tears, but these were tears of relief and joy. For so long, she had felt alone, betrayed, and vulnerable. But now she understood that she had never truly been alone. Someone had been watching over her, guiding her, and returning when she needed protection most. She felt a profound sense of gratitude and love for Thomas, not in the way of romance, but in the way one feels for a guardian, a teacher, and a steadfast presence in life. As the day passed, the villagers began to notice changes in Leela. She walked with confidence, smiled more freely, and even helped those who came seeking Thomas's blacksmithing services. People whispered about the transformation, noticing how the girl who had once been timid and frightened now moved with a quiet strength. Some wondered about Thomas, too, a blind blacksmith who seemed ordinary but carried extraordinary wisdom and care. One evening, as Leela prepared a simple meal, she turned to Thomas. "I've been thinking about the future," she said. "I want to live a life where I can protect and guide others too, the way you have guided me. I want my child to grow up knowing strength, kindness, and hope." Thomas smiled warmly. "That is the right way to think, Leela. Protection and care are lessons we pass on, not just for ourselves, but for the next generation. You will be an amazing mother, and your child will be lucky to have you. And remember, even if I am not always near, the lessons you have learned will guide you." The bond between them deepened further as Leela's pregnancy progressed. She began to share stories from her past, of her childhood, her dreams, and even the day she was sold for 4 coins. Thomas listened without interruption, offering comfort and perspective. He reminded her that the past could not be changed, but the future was full of possibilities. He showed her how to find hope in small moments, like the warmth of the sun, the laughter of a child, or the sound of water flowing in the stream. Finally, the day arrived when Leela went into labor. Thomas was by her side the entire time, offering guidance, encouragement, and unwavering support. The experience was long and difficult, but Thomas remained calm and patient, helping her breathe, reassuring her, and celebrating every small milestone. His presence was steady and comforting, a living reminder of protection, care, and love. When the baby was finally born, healthy and strong, Leela held the child close, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We are safe now. I feel happy, truly happy." Thomas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his voice soft. "Yes, Leela, you are safe. And this child will grow up surrounded by care, guidance, and love. The past has been painful, but the future is full of hope." As Leela cradled her newborn, she thought about everything that had led to this moment. The fear, the betrayal, the rescue, and the years of quiet protection Thomas had provided. She realized that life had a way of bringing the right people into our path at the exact moment we need them. Thomas had been her guardian all along, and his return had been a miracle she could never forget. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Thomas taught Leela how to care for the child, how to craft small toys and tools, and how to navigate the world with confidence. Leela grew stronger each day, and her bond with her child deepened. She also noticed the joy and satisfaction in Thomas, who seemed fulfilled in ways she had not fully understood before. One quiet evening, as the sun set over the village, Leela sat outside the workshop, holding her child, while Thomas stood nearby, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. She looked at him and smiled. "Thank you, Thomas, for everything. For being my guardian, for protecting me, for helping me believe in hope again. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Thomas shook his head gently. "You don't need to repay me, Leela. The gift of life, the gift of protection, the gift of hope, these are not things to be repaid. They are things to be shared, passed on, and honored. You have learned that, and now you can share it with your child and with the world." Leela felt a sense of completion, a deep understanding that her journey had come full circle. The girl who had once been sold for 4 coins, frightened and alone, had grown into a strong woman, cared for and protected by someone who had been her guardian since childhood. She realized that even in the darkest moments there could be light, and that kindness, courage, and protection could appear in the most unexpected forms. As night fell and the stars twinkled above, Leela held her child close, feeling warmth, love, and safety. She knew that life would have challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. And in Thomas, she had a protector, a guide, and a guardian angel in human form. Someone who had come into her life not by chance, but by destiny, and who had stayed to ensure she and her child would thrive. The story of the blind blacksmith and the girl he saved was not one of grand fame or fortune. It was a story of quiet heroism, of patience, and of love expressed through care, guidance, and unwavering presence. It was a story that reminded Leela, and would remind generations to come, that even in the harshest circumstances, hope could be found, protection could arrive, and life could be beautiful again.